What happens when the person you trust most in the world becomes the one you fear the most? On a warm January evening in 2013, an ambulance screamed through the golden gates of Dubai's most exclusive neighborhood. Inside a marble palace worth $30 million, paramedics found 23-year-old Sheikha Noor collapsed at the bottom of a grand staircase. Her breathing was fading fast. A glass of milk sat abandoned on the step above her, still warm to the touch. Her older brother, Sheikh Nasser, stood in the doorway watching. His face showed concern. His voice trembled with worry as he explained how his beloved sister had simply slipped and fallen. But there was something in his eyes that made the paramedics uncomfortable. Something that didn't quite match his words. By the time they reached the hospital, Noor was gone. Have you ever discovered a secret so explosive about someone you love that it changed everything between you? Have you ever felt torn between protecting family and doing what's right? Do you know what it's like when someone you've looked up to your entire life suddenly becomes a stranger? Because that's exactly what happened to Noor when she stumbled across her brother's hidden life. Maybe you've been in a situation where speaking the truth could destroy relationships, careers, even entire families. Maybe you've wrestled with that impossible choice between staying quiet and watching someone you care about make terrible decisions, or speaking up and facing their rage. Here's the problem that tore this family apart. Sheikh Nasser wasn't just any older brother. He was one of the most powerful men in the United Arab Emirates, sitting on Dubai's executive council, controlling millions in government contracts. He was married with 4 children, respected throughout the region as a pillar of tradition and Islamic values. But for 2 years, he'd been living a double life. While his wife raised their children and his community praised his devotion to family honor, Nasser was secretly flying to Europe every few weeks to meet his Italian mistress. Elena Rossi was everything his world would never accept: divorced, Catholic, independent, and completely forbidden by every rule he'd sworn to uphold. When Noor accidentally discovered receipts showing hundreds of thousands of dollars being transferred to Elena's art gallery in Milan, she faced an impossible choice: stay silent and watch her brother destroy their family's reputation, or confront him and demand he end the affair. She chose confrontation, and that choice cost her everything. But here's what haunts investigators to this day. How far would you go to protect a secret that could destroy your entire world? What price would you pay to keep your darkest truth buried? And when your own family becomes the threat to everything you've built, what becomes acceptable? Because what Nasser did next wasn't just murder, it was the calculated elimination of the one person who could expose him. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was a brother methodically planning his sister's death, down to the very last detail. The saffron-laced milk wasn't an accident. The bruise on her skull wasn't from falling. And the factory-reset phone and laptop weren't a coincidence. Look, if you're someone who believes that truth matters more than comfort, if you think family loyalty should never excuse murder, then you need to subscribe to this channel right now. Because what I'm about to reveal will shatter every assumption you have about family bonds, about power, and about the deadly lengths some people will go to protect their reputation. And if you're still on the fence about subscribing, let me ask you this. Are you afraid of uncomfortable truths? Because this story is about to get much, much darker. The question isn't whether Nasser killed his sister. The question is how he almost got away with it. Dubai glitters like a jewel against the desert, its skyscrapers reaching toward heaven while secrets fester in the shadows below. This is a city built on dreams and oil money, where Lamborghinis cruise past gold souks and where tradition battles modernity every single day. The Al-Hazar family lived at the very pinnacle of this world. Their villa on Jumeirah Bay Island wasn't just a home. It was a fortress of marble and mirror, surrounded by perfectly manicured gardens and protected by gates that cost more than most people's houses. Inside those walls, ancient customs ruled with iron discipline. Sheikh Nasser had everything a man could want: power that stretched across Emirates, wealth that seemed infinite, a wife from one of the region's most respected families, for healthy children who would carry on the family name. But he also had something else: a hunger for a life his world would never allow. Every few weeks, Nasser would tell his family he was traveling for business. His private jet would file flight plans to London or Paris for diplomatic meetings. His security detail would book conference rooms at 5-star hotels. But Nasser wasn't attending meetings. He was racing through Italian countryside roads in Elena Rossi's vintage Ferrari, drinking wine in Tuscan vineyards, and living as just another wealthy tourist with his sophisticated European girlfriend. Elena was brilliant, accomplished, and dangerous to everything Nasser represented. At 42, she had already survived one marriage, built her own successful art gallery, and had no interest in hiding in anyone's shadow. She spoke four languages, debated politics with passion, and challenged every traditional belief Nasser had been raised to accept. For him, she represented freedom. For his family, she would represent destruction. Meanwhile, Noor was building her own rebellion, but hers was transparent, hopeful, and completely legal. Fresh from completing her master's degree at the London School of Economics, she returned to Dubai in late 2011 with fire in her eyes and reform on her mind. While her female cousins were content to shop and socialize, Noor wanted to revolutionize their family's charitable foundation. She envisioned scholarships for women, microcredit programs for female entrepreneurs, and partnerships with international organizations promoting education across the Middle East. Her father, Sheikh Ziad, was impressed but cautious. "Let her try," he told family members. "Young people need to feel useful." So Noor threw herself into the work with intensity that worried some relatives. She arrived at the foundation offices before dawn, stayed past midnight, and demanded to review every financial record going back 5 years. That's when she found them. Hidden among legitimate charity expenses were wire transfers that made no sense. AD 180,000 to a Milan gallery she'd never heard of. AD 220,000 marked as cultural consultation fees. AD 350,000 labeled European art acquisition. When Noor asked the foundation's longtime accountant about these payments, the man's face went pale. "His Excellency Sheikh Nasser handles all international cultural relationships," he stammered. "Perhaps you should ask him directly." But Noor wasn't satisfied with vague answers. She traced the bank routing numbers. She researched the recipient gallery online. She discovered that Rossi Arte Milano specialized in contemporary European paintings, exactly the kind of modern art her traditional family would never purchase. Most people would have stopped there. Most sisters would have quietly approached their brother and asked for an explanation. Noor booked a flight to Milan. 3 days later, she stood in Elena Rossi's gallery beneath a ceiling painted by Renaissance masters, shaking hands with the woman who was unknowingly destroying her family's reputation one wire transfer at a time. Elena was gracious, intelligent, and completely unaware that her lover's sister was standing in front of her. She showed Noor around the gallery, explained the provenance of various pieces, and even mentioned her special client from the Gulf, who had been instrumental in supporting the gallery's growth. "He's very private," Elena said with a smile, "but very generous. Without him, I never could have expanded into contemporary installations." Noor spent 2 hours in that gallery, asking careful questions and taking mental notes. By the time she left, she had confirmed her worst fears. Her brother wasn't just having an affair. He was funding his mistress's entire business with money that was supposed to help educate young women across the Emirates. The betrayal cut deeper than just the lies. Nasser had always been her hero, the brother who encouraged her education when other male relatives suggested she focus on marriage prospects. Now she discovered he was stealing from their family's charity to bankroll a relationship that violated everything their community stood for. On the flight back to Dubai, Noor made her decision. She would confront Nasser privately, give him a chance to end the affair voluntarily, and find a way to return the misappropriated funds without involving their father. She believed in redemption. She believed in second chances. She believed that the brother who had once protected her would never hurt her. She was wrong about all of it. Before we continue with what happened when Noor confronted her brother, let me ask you something. Are you still watching? Drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from, because the story gets darker than you can imagine, and I need to know you're ready for what comes next. Noor waited 3 days before approaching her brother. She wanted to choose the perfect moment, when they could speak privately without interruption. The opportunity came during their family's weekly gathering at their father's estate. After dinner, while the men discussed business in the main majlis and the women shared gossip over cardamom tea, Noor followed Nasser into the walled garden behind the house. This was their childhood sanctuary, where they had once shared secrets and dreams under the jasmine trees. Now it would become the scene of their final conversation. "I went to Milan," Noor said without preamble. Nasser froze, his coffee cup halfway to his lips. For a moment, neither sibling spoke. The only sound was water trickling from the fountain their grandmother had installed decades earlier. "What are you talking about?" Nasser finally asked, but his voice already carried the weight of defeat. "I met Elena Rossi. Beautiful gallery. She told me all about her generous client from the Gulf." Noor pulled out her phone and showed him photos she'd taken of the wire transfer receipts. AD 800,000 over 2 years, Nasser. Money meant for scholarship stolen to fund your European vacation romance. The security cameras mounted discreetly throughout the garden would later capture what happened next. Nasser setting down his coffee with deliberate calm, Noor holding her ground despite her brother's growing agitation, and a conversation that escalated from whispered arguments to raised voices over the course of 20 minutes. "You have no idea what you're interfering with," Nasser hissed. "This is not some college philosophy debate, Noor. This is real life with real consequences." "Real consequences." Noor's voice rose. "You mean like stealing from charity? Like betraying your wife? Like violating every principle our father taught us? Our father taught me to protect this family's position. Do you understand what happens if this becomes public? My seat on the executive council disappears. The construction contracts our company depends on get cancelled. The respect our family has built over generations gets destroyed because my naive little sister decided to play detective." But Noor wasn't backing down. In her mind, this was exactly the kind of corruption she had studied at university, the exact type of abuse of power that kept societies from progressing. "End it," she said firmly. "End the affair, return the money, and I won't tell Baba. But if you don't, I will." The threat hung between them like a blade. In traditional Emirati culture, family honor isn't just about reputation, it's about survival. A scandal involving extramarital affairs, misappropriated funds, and public humiliation could destroy not just Nasser's career but the family's standing for generations. Their father, Sheikh Ziad, had built his legacy on moral authority. Learning that his eldest son had been funding a foreign mistress with charity money would be devastating beyond repair. Nasser knew his father's response would be swift and brutal. Disinheritance was the least he could expect. Public denunciation was almost certain. The marriage his parents had arranged with Sheikha Huda would likely be dissolved in scandal, separating him from his children and leaving him financially ruined. "You're asking me to destroy my own happiness," Nasser said quietly. "I'm asking you to stop destroying our family's honor," Noor replied. "And if I refuse?" "The Foundation Board meets next Wednesday. I'll present my findings about financial irregularities and recommend a full audit. The story will reach Baba by Thursday morning." Nasser stared at his sister for a long moment. This young woman who had once followed him around the house begging for attention was now threatening to obliterate everything he had worked to build. The power dynamic between them had shifted completely. She held his future in her hands, and they both knew it. "You would really betray your own brother?" he asked. "You already betrayed your family," she answered. "I'm trying to save it." The conversation ended when other family members began moving toward the garden. Nasser walked away without another word, but the security footage captured one final detail that investigators would later find chilling. As he passed beneath the garden's archway, Nasser turned back to look at his sister one last time. His expression was no longer angry or pleading. It was calculating. That night, Noor returned to her own villa believing she had given her brother the wake-up call he needed. She trusted that faced with the threat of exposure, Nasser would choose family over forbidden love. She never considered that he might choose murder instead. 5 days passed before Nasser made his move. 5 days during which he attended council meetings, played with his children, and kissed his wife goodnight while his mind calculated the precise steps needed to eliminate his problem. On January 19, 2013, everything was ready. Nasser began his preparation at 4:30 p.m. by visiting his wife Sheikha Huda in their bedroom. She had been struggling with postpartum depression following their youngest child's birth, and her doctor had prescribed zolpidem to help her sleep. The medication sat in their private bathroom cabinet, 5 small white pills remaining in the bottle. Nasser pocketed 3 of them at 5:15 p.m., He drove to Noor's villa using his personal car instead of his usual driver. The security cameras at the estate's entrance recorded his arrival, but Nasser had thought of that too. His presence wouldn't seem unusual. He often visited his sister for dinner or family discussions. Noor greeted him warmly, apparently relieved that he had come to talk. She had spent the week hoping their confrontation in the garden would lead to reconciliation, not realizing her brother had spent those same days planning her death. "Have you decided?" she asked as they sat in her living room. "I've decided you're right," Nasser lied smoothly. "The affair has to end. I'll call Elena tonight and arrange to transfer the money back to the foundation." Noor's face lit up with genuine joy. "I knew you would make the right choice. I knew my brother was still in there somewhere." Her trust in him, even after everything, made what came next almost effortless. At 6:45 p.m., Nasser excused himself to use the bathroom. Instead, he went to Noor's kitchen where her housekeeper had left a glass pitcher of fresh milk infused with saffron, Noor's favorite evening drink. The cook had prepared it exactly as she did every night, warm and sweet with just a hint of spice. Nasser crushed the 3 zolpidem tablets between 2 spoons and stirred the powder into the milk. The medication dissolved completely, leaving no visible trace. Zolpidem is tasteless in small quantities, and the saffron would mask any slight bitterness. That he poured a single glass and brought it to his sister. "A toast," he said, raising his own glass of water. "To family loyalty." "To doing the right thing," Noor replied, taking a long sip of the drugged milk. They talked for another hour about family matters, foundation business, and Noor's plans for expanding women's education programs. Nasser listened patiently, watched carefully, and waited for the medication to take effect. 7:46 p.m. Noor began to feel dizzy. "I think I'm more tired than I realized," she said, pressing her hand to her forehead. "Maybe I should go rest." "Let me help you upstairs," Nasser offered as they moved toward the staircase. Noor stumbled slightly. The zolpidem was working faster than Nasser had anticipated. Her coordination was already compromised, her reflexes slowing dangerously. At 7:52 p.m., villa staff in the kitchen heard the sound of breaking glass from upstairs. What they didn't know was that Nasser had just smashed the empty milk glass against the marble floor of Noor's study, creating the crystal decanter fragments that would become his weapon. He selected the largest piece, a curved shard with a perfect handle that fit comfortably in his palm. Noor was sitting on her bed when he returned to her room, struggling to stay conscious, but still alert enough to be confused by her brother's behavior. "Nasser, I don't feel well," she mumbled. "Something's wrong." "I know," he replied quietly. "I'm sorry it has to be this way." The blow to the base of her skull was precise and controlled. The glass shard left the distinctive crescent-shaped bruise that would later puzzle forensic pathologists. Noor collapsed immediately, unconscious but still breathing. Nasser checked her pulse, weak but steady. He had perhaps 10 minutes before the zolpidem and head trauma combined to stop her breathing entirely. He lifted his sister's unconscious body and carried her to the top of the marble staircase. Then he arranged her carefully, positioning her head at an angle that would suggest she had fallen while walking downstairs, struck her head on the marble steps, and died from the resulting brain trauma. At 8:16 p.m., Nasser called 999. "My sister has fallen down the stairs," he told the emergency dispatcher, injecting just the right amount of panic into his voice. "She's not responding. Please hurry." The paramedics arrived 12 minutes later to find Nasser cradling Noor's head in his lap, tears streaming down his face as he begged her to wake up. His performance was flawless. The glass fragments from the broken milk glass had been swept up and disposed of in the kitchen garbage. The empty zolpidem bottle had been returned to his wife's medicine cabinet. The security footage would show exactly what Nasser wanted it to show: a brother arriving for a normal family visit and leaving in an ambulance with his dying sister. By 8:47 p.m., as the ambulance raced toward Rashid Hospital, Noor's breathing had stopped completely. Nasser rode beside her body, holding her hand and whispering prayers for her soul, playing the role of grieving brother even though no one was watching. The perfect murder had taken less than 4 hours to execute. But perfection, as Nasser was about to discover, is much harder to maintain than it is to achieve. If this story is making you question how well you really know the people closest to you, smash that like button, because we're about to uncover how even the most powerful people can't escape the truth forever. The investigation that followed would expose every lie Nasser told and every detail he thought he had hidden. The first person to suspect murder wasn't a detective or forensic expert. It was Dr. Amira Hassan, the emergency room physician who received Noor's body at Rashid Hospital. Dr. Hassan had seen dozens of accidental fall victims during her 15 years in emergency medicine. She knew what those injuries looked like: the random bruising patterns, the chaotic trauma distribution, the way gravity and momentum leave their unmistakable signatures on human flesh. Noor's injuries didn't match. The bruise at the base of her skull was too precise, too controlled. Falls down marble stairs create multiple impact points as the body tumbles and bounces. Noor had exactly one injury, a crescent-shaped contusion that looked more like a deliberate strike than an accidental impact. At 11:30 p.m. Dr. Hassan made the phone call that would change everything. "This is Dr. Hassan at Rashid Hospital. I need to speak with someone from CID about a suspicious death." Major Faisal Al-Mansouri was at home with his family when his phone rang. At 34, he was one of Dubai's rising stars in criminal investigation, known for his methodical approach and refusal to accept convenient explanations. He had built his reputation solving cases that other detectives dismissed as accidents or suicides. "What makes you think it's suspicious?" Al-Mansouri asked Dr. Hassan. "The injury pattern is wrong. And there's something else. We found traces of zolpidem in her blood. Enough to incapacitate an adult. But she wasn't prescribed any sleep medication." Al-Mansouri was in his car within 10 minutes. By midnight, he was standing in Noor's villa, studying the marble staircase where she allegedly fell. The scene looked perfect, too perfect. The blood spatter was minimal and contained. There were no scuff marks on the walls, no signs of a body tumbling down 15 steps. Most telling of all, Noor's phone and laptop had been factory reset sometime between 8 p.m. and the arrival of paramedics. Who had access to reset these devices? Al-Mansouri asked the villa's head of security. "Only family members know the passwords," the man replied nervously. His Excellency Sheikh Nasser was here this evening visiting his sister. When Al-Mansouri tried to interview Nasser the following morning, he encountered the first of many obstacles. The Sheikh's private secretary kept him waiting in an ornate reception room for 4 hours, offering endless cups of Arabic coffee but no access to the man he needed to question. "His Excellency is in mourning," the secretary explained. "Perhaps you could return next week?" But Al-Mansouri had dealt with powerful families before. He knew that delay tactics usually meant someone was buying time to construct a better story. Instead of leaving, he obtained a court order to seize Noor's electronic devices and began the painstaking process of digital forensics. What he found in the cloud backups would crack the case wide open. Noor had been meticulous about documenting everything. Her phone automatically backed up photos to a secure server every night at midnight. Her laptop synchronized files to 3 different cloud storage services. Even though the devices themselves had been wiped clean, months of data remained accessible through her online accounts. The folder labeled Contemporary Art Sponsorships contained dozens of wire transfer confirmations to Rossi Arte Milano. But more damaging were the photos, images that Noor had clearly taken without Elena's knowledge during her visit to the gallery. There was Elena standing beside a painting, gesturing as she explained its history. Elena laughing at something off-camera. Elena holding up a small sculpture while sunlight streamed through the gallery windows. But the most devastating evidence was in a separate folder labeled Summer 2012. 63 photographs of Nasser and Elena together on a yacht off the coast of Sardinia. The images showed them swimming, dining on deck, and embracing against Mediterranean sunsets. In several photos, Elena wore a diamond bracelet that Al-Mansouri would later trace to a Dubai jewelry store, purchased by Nasser for $85,000 just days before their Italian vacation. The digital trail painted a complete picture of the affair, the financial fraud, and Noor's discovery of both. Even more incriminating were the voice messages Noor had sent to her closest friend at university just 3 days before her death. "I confronted him about Elena," Noor's voice said in one recording. "He's furious with me, but I don't care. If he won't end it voluntarily, I'll tell Baba everything. Even if it destroys our family, at least we'll be living honestly." In another message, sent the day before she died, Noor sounded worried. Nasser came by today acting strange. He apologized and said he would end the affair, but something felt wrong. He kept asking about my evidence, whether I had told anyone else. I think he's planning something. The final voice message was sent at 6:30 p.m. on January 19th, just 15 minutes before Nasser arrived at her villa. If something happens to me, Noor whispered into her phone, look at the foundation's financial records. Look at the wire transfers to Milan. My brother is not who everyone thinks he is. Al-Mansuri played that message 3 times, each repetition strengthening his resolve to build an airtight case against one of the most powerful men in the Emirates. But digital evidence was only part of the puzzle. The major also needed to prove how the murder was committed. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Nasser's own wife. When Al-Mansuri interviewed Sheikha Huda about her husband's whereabouts on the night of the murder, she mentioned something that seemed insignificant at the time. I noticed my sleeping pills were running low, she said. I had 5 tablets left on Monday, but by Thursday there were only 2. I thought perhaps the maid had accidentally spilled some while cleaning. A quick check with the pharmacy confirmed that Sheikha Huda's Zolpidem prescription matched exactly the compound found in Noor's bloodstream. The final piece of evidence came from the villa's garbage collection. Al-Mansuri's team recovered fragments of a milk glass from the kitchen waste bin, fragments that contained microscopic traces of Zolpidem residue. BY February 15th, just 4 weeks after Noor's death, Al-Mansuri had assembled a comprehensive case file. The evidence was overwhelming. Motive, means, opportunity, and a digital trail that documented every aspect of the crime. But arresting a member of the ruling class required political approval from the highest levels of government. That approval came at 2:47 a.m. on September 12, 2013. Sheikh Nasser bin Ziyad al-Hazar was taken into custody while sleeping in his bed, his wife and children watching in shock as Dubai police led him away in handcuffs. The single photograph that leaked to social media, Nasser in his white dishdasha, prayer beads still clutched in his bound hands, would become one of the most shared images in UAE's social media history before being scrubbed from the internet within hours. The man who thought he had committed the perfect murder was about to discover that in the digital age. No secret stays buried forever. Look, I know this was heavy, but if you made it this far, you're clearly someone who isn't afraid of the truth. The question is, will you subscribe to see more stories like this? Or will you let fear of uncomfortable truths hold you back? Comment below and tell me why you won't subscribe if you're still on the fence. The trial of Sheikh Nasser bin Ziyad al-Hazar began on November 3, 2013, in a courtroom that had never seen anything like it. For the first time in UAE legal history, a member of the ruling class faced capital murder charges with the full weight of forensic evidence stacked against him. The proceedings were officially closed to the public, but details leaked through court clerks, legal assistants, and family members who couldn't resist sharing fragments of the drama unfolding behind those heavy wooden doors. Nasser's defense team, led by one of London's most expensive criminal barristers, built their strategy around Article 334 of the UAE Penal Code, the honor provision that had protected men like him for decades. My client discovered his sister was threatening to destroy his family's reputation, the lead attorney argued. In a moment of grave provocation, faced with the complete annihilation of everything his ancestors had built, he lost control. This was not premeditated murder. This was a man defending his family's honor against an attack from within. The defense painted Noor as a westernized radical who had returned from London with dangerous ideas about exposing family secrets. They argued that her threat to reveal Nasser's private affairs constituted such severe provocation that any reasonable man might react violently. But prosecutor Khalid Al-Zabi had spent months preparing for exactly this argument. Honor. Al-Zabi stood before the 3-judge panel, holding up the evidence bags containing Zolpidem tablets and glass fragments. What honor is there in crushing sleeping pills? What honor is there in striking an unconscious woman with a glass weapon? What honor is there in staging a crime scene and lying to paramedics while your sister dies? The prosecution methodically destroyed every element of the honor defense. The Zolpidem proved premeditation. You don't accidentally drug someone's milk. The factory reset devices showed consciousness of guilt. The precise nature of the head wound demonstrated calculated violence, not momentary rage. Most damaging of all were Noor's own words, played from her phone recordings in her clear, determined voice. "If something happens to me, look at the Foundation's financial records." When that message echoed through the courtroom, several family members began crying. Even Nasser's own mother covered her face with her hands. The trial lasted 4 months, with testimony from forensic experts, digital analysts, and medical professionals. Dr. Hassan explained how the injury pattern was inconsistent with an accidental fall. Major Al-Mansouri walked the court through the digital evidence step by step. A pharmacologist testified about zolpidem's effects and the precise dosage found in Noor's system. But the most powerful moment came when prosecutors played security footage from the villa's garden, the conversation between Nasser and Noor 5 days before her death. Though there was no audio, body language experts testified about what the video revealed. Noor's defensive posture, Nasser's aggressive gestures, and the moment when his expression shifted from anger to cold calculation. The defense tried desperately to shift blame. They suggested Noor might have taken the zolpidem herself, that her death could have been suicide disguised as murder. They questioned the chain of custody for digital evidence. They even implied that Major Al-Mansouri had fabricated evidence to advance his career. Nothing worked. On March 18, 2014, the Criminal Court of Dubai delivered its verdict, guilty of premeditated murder. But the sentence revealed how deeply honor culture still influenced the justice system. Instead of the death penalty that prosecutors had requested, the court sentenced Nasser to 12 years in prison, citing mitigating family circumstances and the extreme provocation he had faced. 12 years for murdering his sister. In most countries, that would be considered a travesty of justice. In the UAE of 2014, it was actually progress. Human rights organizations condemned the sentence as inadequate, but legal experts recognized it as a significant step forward. For the first time, a powerful man had been convicted and imprisoned for an honor killing, even if the punishment didn't match the crime. Nasser served his sentence at Al Awar Central Prison, where his wealth and connections earned him privileges unavailable to ordinary inmates. He had a private cell, access to books and newspapers, and regular visits from family members who still supported him despite his conviction. But prison changed him in ways no one expected. Guards reported that Nasser spent most of his time reading religious texts and writing letters, hundreds of letters that were never sent. Some inmates claimed he talked constantly about his sister, expressing regret that seemed genuine but came far too late. In December 2022, during Ramadan, Nasser was released under a presidential amnesty program. The condition of his release required him to donate AED 30 million to a government-run shelter for domestic violence survivors, money that would help women escape the kind of family violence that had killed his sister. Today, Nasser lives on a date palm estate near the Liwa Oasis, officially devoted to Quranic study and charitable works. He rarely appears in public, never gives interviews, and has become something of a ghost in the society that once celebrated him. His wife Sheikha Huda divorced him while he was in prison and remarried a businessman from Abu Dhabi. His children, now teenagers, have taken their stepfather's name and refuse contact with their biological father. The Al-Hazar family fortune, once worth hundreds of millions, was largely distributed to charity as part of the blood money settlement and legal penalties. The construction company that had made them wealthy was sold to competitors. But Noor's death accomplished something her life never could. It changed the law itself. In November 2020, 7 years after her murder, the UAE passed Federal Decree Law No. 10, completely abolishing the honor-killing provision that had protected her brother. Today, a man who kills his sister faces the same penalties as any other murderer: life imprisonment or death. The law was passed quietly, without fanfare or media attention. But legal scholars know exactly which case inspired the change. Elena Rossi, the woman whose love affair had triggered this tragedy, disappeared from Dubai's art scene immediately after Nasser's arrest. Friends say she moved to Barcelona, where she runs a small gallery specializing in contemporary Spanish artists. She has never spoken publicly about the case, though Italian journalists report she suffers from severe anxiety and rarely travels. In a single interview with a Milan newspaper in 2019, Elena said only, "I thought love could conquer tradition. I learned that some traditions fight back with violence." The Rossi Arte Milano Gallery closed permanently in 2015. The building now houses a children's bookstore. As for Noor herself, her memory lives on in ways both public and private. The family foundation she had tried to reform was renamed the NBZ Institute for Women's Enterprise and now provides exactly the kind of scholarships and business support she had envisioned. Every November 19th, on the anniversary of her death, someone places a bouquet of white desert lilies at the Institute's reception desk. The card is always signed the same way, "For the sister who dreamed bigger." No one knows who brings the flowers, but staff members have learned not to ask questions. What does Noor's story teach us about the families we think we know? Her murder wasn't just about one brother's desperation to hide an affair. It was about the collision between two worlds, the ancient codes of honor and shame that have governed Middle Eastern families for centuries, and the modern reality of global connections, digital footprints, and women who refuse to stay silent. Think about your own family dynamics. How many secrets are being kept right now around your dinner table? How many relatives are living double lives, presenting one face to the family while pursuing completely different desires in private? Noor's tragedy reminds us that the people we trust most completely are often the ones capable of the greatest betrayal. But there's a deeper lesson here about power and accountability. For generations, men like Nasser operated with impunity. They could steal, cheat, and even kill, knowing that family honor would protect them from consequences. The honor-killing provision in UAE law wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate choice to value male reputation over female lives. Noor's death became the catalyst that finally changed that calculation. When Major al-Mansouri refused to accept the convenient explanation of an accidental fall, when Dr. Hassan insisted on a proper investigation despite pressure from powerful families, when prosecutors pushed for real consequences instead of symbolic punishment, they were all participating in a larger transformation of justice itself. The digital evidence that convicted Nasser represents something revolutionary in traditional societies. You can't delete cloud backups with family connections. You can't bribe a forensic pathologist's findings. You can't intimidate DNA evidence or threaten toxicology reports into changing their testimony. Technology has made it exponentially harder for powerful people to commit perfect crimes, even in societies where wealth and status once guaranteed protection. But perhaps the most important lesson from this case is about the price of speaking truth to power within families. Noor could have stayed quiet. She could have ignored the wire transfers, pretended not to understand what they meant, and continued living comfortably as the beloved sister of a powerful man. Many people in her position would have made that choice. Instead, she chose to confront corruption even when it came from someone she loved. She chose accountability over comfort, justice over family loyalty, and truth over peace. That choice cost her everything. Yet her death accomplished what her life might never have achieved. The law that protected her killer has been abolished. The foundation she wanted to reform now helps thousands of women across the Emirates. The investigation techniques that solved her case have been applied to dozens of other suspicious deaths that might once have been dismissed as accidents. Noor's story forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about our own moral courage. When we discover that someone we love is doing something wrong, stealing, cheating, hurting others, do we have the strength to hold them accountable? Or do we choose the easier path of willful blindness? Most of us will never face stakes as high as Noor did. Most of us won't discover that our siblings are embezzling charity funds or conducting affairs that violate fundamental family values. But all of us will face moments when we must choose between loyalty and justice, between keeping peace and demanding truth. Noor's legacy suggests that these moments define not just our individual character, but the character of our entire society. The UAE of 2024 is not the same country where Noor died in 2013. Women have more legal protections, domestic violence is taken more seriously, and honor killings carry the same penalties as any other murder. These changes didn't happen automatically. They happened because people like Noor were willing to challenge systems that protected the powerful at the expense of the vulnerable. But the transformation is far from complete, and not just in the Middle East. Around the world, women are still killed by male relatives who believe family honor justifies violence. Digital evidence is still ignored when it implicates wealthy or connected suspects. Victims are still blamed for provoking their own murders by refusing to stay silent about abuse or corruption. Noor's story reminds us that progress requires individuals willing to pay personal costs for collective change. It requires investigators who won't accept convenient lies, prosecutors who will challenge powerful defendants, and ordinary citizens who demand accountability even when it's uncomfortable. Most importantly, it requires us to remember that behind every true crime story is a real person whose life was cut short by someone else's choices. Noor wasn't just a victim in a sensational case. She was a young woman with dreams, ambitions, and the courage to fight for what she believed was right. She wanted to educate women, support female entrepreneurs, and modernize charitable giving in her community. She wanted her family to live with integrity instead of hiding behind wealth and status. She wanted the foundation that bore her family's name to actually help people instead of funding her brother's secret lifestyle. These weren't radical demands. They were the hopes of someone who believed her family could be better than their worst impulses. In the end, Noor got everything she wanted, just not in the way she expected. The foundation does support women's education. Her family's corruption was exposed and punished. The legal system was reformed to protect future victims, but she paid for these victories with her life, killed by the brother she had tried to save from his own destructive choices. That's the final lesson of this tragedy. Sometimes doing the right thing costs everything, but the alternative, staying silent while injustice continues, costs even more. Every time someone speaks up about abuse, corruption, or violence within their own family, they honor Noor's memory. Every time investigators refuse to accept convenient explanations for suspicious deaths, they continue the work that Major al-Mansouri began. Every time laws are changed to protect the vulnerable instead of the powerful, they build on the foundation that Noor's death created. Her story ended in a marble staircase in Dubai, but her impact continues in courtrooms, police stations, and family conversations around the world. The question isn't whether we'll face moments that test our moral courage. We will. The question is whether we'll have the strength to choose truth over comfort when those moments arrive. Noor made that choice, and it changed everything. Thank you for watching this difficult but important story. If it made you think differently about family loyalty, justice, or the courage required to challenge people we love, please hit that like button and subscribe for more true crime stories that matter. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss an episode. And remember, the truth is worth fighting for, even when the cost seems too high to pay.